Corbett? Corbett here. Leno? Leno here.
All right, then we will proceed as a committee. And usually Senator Yee would have been first, but my understanding is he has graciously allowed Senator Wolk to present first. Before we get to your bill, however, I do want to just mention the schedule for this afternoon. We do have Senate session beginning at 2 o'clock, and then we have Democratic caucus following the session. And we have a lot of bills here and obviously a lot of witnesses and others that are interested in the proceedings. So we will be going until 2 o'clock as a committee, then we will be briefly adjourning for session and caucus, and then we will be reconvening immediately after the Democratic caucus. So, Ms. Wolk.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to thank
for the members, it's SB number 154, item 4 on your agenda. Go ahead.
I'd like to, again, thank Senator Yee, and I would like to accept the suggested amendments in the analysis on page 6 for submitting a final report to the legislature by July 1st, 2014. Senate Bill 154 eliminates the sunset date and allows Solano County to continue collecting a fee on the marriage licenses and copies of vital records to support domestic violence prevention and intervention services for victims and their children. Several counties and cities are already authorized to do this, some on a permanent basis. The county deposits the fees into a fund that is currently being used for the development of a Solano County Family Justice Center. Eliminating the sunset will provide greater opportunities for the SFJC to leverage other funds. Domestic violence prevention services are so important to families in need, and Solano County has built a very impressive consortium to provide services to our residents, which, again, as we know, is going to be increasingly important as we move through these budget times. 154 will help them do that. With me to testify is Carolyn Wold, who's director of the Family Justice Center, and Casey Gwynn, who started the first Family Justice Center and is now director of the National Family Justice Center Alliance. I ask for your aye vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here today, and thank you to Senator Wolk for taking a leadership role in the work that we're doing locally in Solano County. Solano County's Family Justice Center efforts started really in earnest in 2004 when we started talking to our victims about how they're accessing services and how, more importantly, how they're not able to access services. And what we found is that victims in Solano County have to navigate 23 different doors in order to get their needs met. The majority of victims will not navigate those 23 doors. If we're lucky, they might navigate 3. As evidence of the incredible need for a family justice center in Solano County, in 2008 and 2009 we had 2 domestic violence-related deaths in each year. In 2010 we had 20. It's an incredible increase. There are lots of reasons why we've had an increase, but more importantly for us, we've got to have a response, and we have to do it collaboratively. We've got to do it efficiently. We've got to have shown outcomes, and we've got to be able to pull down other funding in order for us to continue to do this collaborative work. We have 23 different agencies who have agreed to co-locate with us in a family justice center. Currently, we have 4 agencies co-locating with us. We started co-locating on February 2nd. We're going to gradually move into larger space, but that's going to require us to have continued funding. We collect about $75,000 a year from vital records fees, but that $75,000 that we collect on an annual basis allows us to pull down over $1 million in funding from other funding sources. So this legislation is incredibly important to us, and I ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Casey Gwynn. I'm honored to serve as the president of the National Family Justice Center Alliance. I'm the former elected city attorney in San Diego, where we first opened a family justice center in 2002 with 27 agencies under one roof. I'm joined today by Gail Strack, who's sitting in the first row back there, who's the CEO of the National Family Justice Center Alliance, and by Vanette Hueso, who's next to me here. Vanette is a survivor of domestic violence. She's a client of the San Diego Family Justice Center, and she's involved with our Voices Committee, both at the national level and the local level, talking about the needs of survivors of domestic violence and the power of having all the services under one roof. So in just one moment, I'd like to just ask Vanette to make a few comments about the importance of the model. But I just wanted to speak to the bill for a moment. We believe that this bill that Solano County has been piloting doing and that other counties have piloted is really a model for the country, allowing local decision makers at the County Board of Supervisors level to decide, one, if they want to impose such a fee, and two, how they want to allocate the funds. And obviously in Solano County, they've chosen to allocate them for a co-located service model where victims can come one place to get everything they need. But we believe this model could be replicated across the country. One of the things that is very powerful, and it has been for Solano County and for other family justice centers in California, of which there are 15 right now, is once you have this piece of sustainability process in place, you become far more competitive in federal grants under the Violence Against Women Act, under Title I, which is the Grants to Encourage Arrest program, because one of the key scoring categories now is what is the sustainability for the program that you're seeking federal funding for. And this creates that avenue for a local community, which is why Solano's been so successful in building their model and obtaining other funding. So we would appreciate your support for this bill. We do believe it's not just a model for Solano, but as I said, could be a model for other communities across California and around the country to help fund services so victims can come one place instead of going from agency to agency to agency telling their story over and over and over again. Because when they have to do that, they go back to their abuser. And eventually that abuse escalates and someone dies. So I appreciate the chance to just ask Vanette to just say a few words in her experience with the systems in California.
Yeah, thank you. Very briefly, please.
Thank you. Thank you. So just coming from a survivor's perspective, I know that there was three things that I was lacking when I was first going through the whole thing, and it was comfort, stability, and safety. Those were the three things that I didn't have. And going to the center provided not only everyone under one roof, but those three things that I needed for myself and for my son. So I ask that you guys please support the bill to continue to give the victims what we all need so we can become successful survivors, and please continue to support the Family Justice Centers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other witnesses in support of the bill?
John Lovell with the California Police Chiefs Association in support.
Other witnesses in support? Any witnesses in opposition? Questions or comments from the members? Okay, we have a motion. Ms. Corbett?
I was going to move the bill as well, but Senator Leno beat me to it. But
I
did want to say, I just wanted to congratulate you. I know you've been back year after year to continue this process. And in looking at the analysis, it's wonderful that you've found some more grant sources. And I just wanted to congratulate you. And the work is very, very important. So thank you for being here and being advocates.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well said, Senator. And I won't repeat it, but I share the sentiment. All right, we have a motion. Call the roll, please.
The motion is due pass as amended to the Senate floor. Evans?
Aye.
Evans, aye. Harmon? No. Harmon, no. Blakesley? No. Blakesley, no. Corbett? Aye. Corbett, aye. Leno? Aye. Leno, aye.
3-2, the bill is out.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Members.
And thank you for your good work on this issue, all of you. All right, Senator Yee, you're next, and you have 3 bills, and I'm looking at the clock. We've got 15 minutes, so I'm going to ask for your guidance in which bill you think we should take first.
Why don't we take, just in file order, why don't you take item number 1?
Item number 1, then SB number 8. Senator Yee, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'll be very, very brief. This bill is a reintroduction of SB 330, which was approved unanimously by this committee last year. All this bill does is talk about open government and transparency. This would just simply make the foundations and auxiliary fall under the California Public Records Act, and with that, urge an aye vote. I've got Jim, you want to start? Sure. Jim Ewert.
Go ahead.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Jim Ewert for the California Newspaper Publishers Association. This is the third time that this committee has heard this bill. It's passed it twice already with very strong support. And just to remind folks here that while these are private organizations, private nonprofit organizations, they are so closely entwined with universities and community colleges that even though they're private, they manage public assets. They're given a tremendous charge to manage public assets. They use facilities that are publicly owned. They use resources that are publicly provided, computers, phones, desks, sports arenas, and the like. We think it's very important that the public understand how these entities do their business on the public's behalf, and that's the need for the bill. Real quick, on the matter of costs, little if any, the analysis did a great job of pointing out the fact that there are little costs. It has not been keyed fiscal any of the 3 times it's going through the body. And if there are any costs associated with implementation of the bill, they're going to be reimbursable to the private nonprofit. And also, I wanted to talk a little bit about the chilling effect, which the opposition has raised quite a bit with respect to donors not coming forward if they don't believe that they can be properly protected by the anonymity provision. I note that at Sonoma State, when the loan default occurred from the former foundation board member, donations to that foundation began to decrease. And they decreased because the donors could not have any way of tracking their donations. They had no way of finding out how their money was being used. And so the chilling effect, if any, was on those donors under current law. We respectfully urge an aye vote.
Thank you. Next witness.
Senator Evans, members of the committee, my name is David Bala Hawkins, representing the California Faculty Association. I'd like to read a short excerpt from the 2001 court decision that addressed this issue in the case of California University Fresno Association versus the Superior Court. The legislature's decision to narrowly define the applicability of the California Public Records Act, balanced against its sweeping goal to safeguard the public, leaves us scratching our judicial heads. The court further wrote, any claims by the CSU administration that donations will be canceled are speculative, supported only by inadmissible hearsay, and are inadequate to demonstrate any significant public interest in nondisclosure. The unsupported statements that a chilling effect would occur constitute nothing more than speculative, self-serving opinions designed to preclude the dissemination of information to which the public is entitled. This is why the CSU administration is opposing this bill. This is their document. You can see that 20% of the California State University operating budget, $1.34 billion, and I'll repeat that, $1.34 billion is hidden from public view. You have made draconian cuts to our institution. We understand the necessity of that in trying to address a severe budget deficit. We are denying access to 40,000 eligible students right now. We don't know how this money is being spent, and there's no way for you as senators in this House to know how this money is being spent. Interestingly enough, we know how some of the money is being spent. Some of the auxiliary funding is being used for executive compensation. At San Luis Obispo, they just hired a new president, being paid $350,000 plus another $30,000 from the foundation. Chancellor Charles Reed also receives $30,000 from the foundation. All we are asking for in this bill is transparency and accountability. That's all we're asking for. Every other state agency must comply with this. These are functions that used to be run by the university. At last count, the California State University had 93 auxiliary organizations that they've created. The only people who have access to those financial statements are campus presidents who approve creation of those auxiliaries. We ask for your aye vote on the bill.
Tony Triguero, California Teachers Association. We also represent community colleges, and for that reason we support the bill. We look forward to a signature because after that signature we look forward to including the K-12 foundations, which we also believe we could use accountability and transparency. Thank you for your aye vote.
Yes, Sherry Golden represented the CSU EU bargaining units 257 and 9. We have been in support of this bill since Senator Yee introduced it, I think, 2 or 3 years ago. We think it's a great bill, and we urge your support. Thank you.
Madam Chair, Senators, Eduardo Martinez with Carter Wedge & Associates on behalf of the California State Pipe Trades Council, the Coalition of California Utility Employees, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, the Western States Council of Sheet Metal Workers, and the International Union of Elevator Constructors and the Utility Workers Union of America in support.
Madam Chair, Stephanie Roberson on behalf of the California Nurses Association. We do appreciate transparency. Our nurses in their facilities and in the UC system have whistleblower protection. So, we definitely feel that transparency and openness on campuses, state government, and facilities are utmost important to make sure patient safety is concerned and for everyone's benefit. So we appreciate this bill. Thank you.
Madam Chair and members, Terry Frank for Californians Aware. The only reason that these operations are run through private nonprofits is to give people a tax benefit. Other than that, all the tools that they use are those of the university campuses to which they're joined at the hips. There's no public policy reason for keeping these institutions opaque to the public, so long as donor privacy can be protected as it is in this bill. Thank you.
Any other witnesses in support? Witnesses in opposition?
Madam Chair and members, Steve Juarez on behalf of the University of California and the 10 independent UC campus foundations, and we are opposed to this bill unless serious, amendments can be made to address our serious concerns. As this committee has been told, this is the third year in which you've had a chance to hear this bill, and we must start again by making some vital points of clarification about UC foundations, because they are different than what has been proposed. First, UC foundations are bodies that are made up of donors and volunteers who, out of their love and appreciation for the university, have organized in such a way to form nonprofits, and I repeat, nonprofit organizations that serve as vehicles to solicit, manage, and make available donated funds to the university. That is their only role, notwithstanding points to the contrary. There are no hidden agendas, no pay-to-play. They are completely objective in terms of the distribution of the monies that they collect. UC auxiliaries, on the other hand, are already covered by the Public Records Act, and that's why they're not part of this bill. So anything as it relates to auxiliaries are not part of this bill. All we're talking about with regard to UC is the 10 foundations which exist on campuses for the sole purpose of raising money. Second, the 10 foundations of the university have continued to assert their willingness to accord themselves according to issues of transparency and accountability, as long as they recognize that they are structured differently than public entities, and therefore the rules that should apply to them should be different. And we have been working on amendments that would, in fact, allow that to happen. Unfortunately, SB 8 fails miserably on accounts of treating these nonprofit foundations differently. Third, the proposal embodied in SB 8 will cause great harm on their ability to raise funds for the university, because some donors, and we have evidence of this through direct testimony of our donors, they will simply choose not to donate or give to other causes if their anonymity cannot be protected by this bill. And again, in listening to our foundations, they are affirmative in the notion that their anonymity cannot be protected by the bill as it's currently constructed. Our estimate has been that this bill will cost millions annually due to lost donations that come to the university otherwise. The bill also fails to protect the confidentiality of alternative investment vehicles, the same coverage that's currently applied to UC investments. And so we would ask that in addition to the amendments that need to be aided in terms of the confidentiality of donors, that alternative investment vehicles also receive confidentiality protection. It comes at a time when they manage these funds, and those funds are used for primarily scholarships, support for student services, and funding for other critical operational and academic functions of the university. In closing, we would respectfully ask the committee to hold this bill in committee until it can be amended to ensure that the negative aspects of this bill will not do serious injury to the financial circumstances of the 10 UC foundations, and in kind, not do damage to the university. We believe that the bill in its current form is a disservice not only to the university, but also to students who are the prime beneficiaries of the foundation's good works, and so for that we'd ask for a no vote.
Senator Harmon, did you have a question of this witness?
Yes, I do, if you allow me, Madam Chair, and I know time is short. We heard from an earlier witness that approximately $30,000 was taken out of one of these funds and used to augment the salary of the president or chancellor, whatever the title.
I'd have to defer to my CSU colleague, because that was a CSU example. We haven't had any examples such as that at UC.
So you think that testimony is false?
No, I would defer to CSU, because that's not, he wasn't referring to a UC issue.
All right, okay, I'll ask the same question to you after you testify. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm
Go
happy
ahead.
to answer the question if you want me to. Yes, we do that. We've done that in 2 cases, and let me use the San Luis Obispo example. We currently hired a president.
Could you state your name and
I'm sorry.
affiliation first for the record?
Karen Zamaripa with the California State University. Sorry. We have, in fact, provided annuities in 2 cases, one to Chancellor Reed, who joined us from out of state and had a portable retirement system. And as is practice throughout higher education throughout the country, we bought a $30,000 annuity from non-state funds, publicly acted upon in a public Board of Trustees meeting to provide that annuity to augment the loss in retirement income that he would experience leaving the fund he was in. We did it a second time most recently when we hired the new president for San Luis Obispo. We did retain him for $350,000. His closest competitor makes $590,000 on the East Coast. So we did provide him a $30,000 annuity, again from non-state funds, at a public action, not only at our Board of Trustees, but also by the Foundation Board itself.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Just a few brief comments, because I know your time is precious here. Unlike the University of California, the legislature created the auxiliaries that operate at the California State University specifically to be non-state, nonprofit entities in order to provide us the ability to do certain functions that we're not allowed to do on the state side. We have 93 auxiliaries. 2/3 of those are ASIs, student government, student unions, and a good portion are our housing and parking programs, including newly established auxiliaries that are creating faculty and staff housing in places like CSU Monterey Bay, CSU Channel Islands, and other areas due to housing costs and our recruitment needs for faculty and staff. So what we have remaining is approximately 23 foundations that do exactly what Mr. Juarez referenced as it relates to the University of California. They are privately fundraising dollars, and it is true that there's about $1.3 billion of assets in all of those auxiliaries, but again, many of those are dedicated to housing programs, parking, and to student unions and to the ASI student governments, which also support student newspapers, NPR, and other functions. What remains is foundation dollars that are going towards scholarships and also the management of grants and contracts, which support the applied research work of our faculty. 95% of those revenues are designated by the giver, and they are reported annually. You all get it. An annual report on our outside giving, what comes in, where it comes from, how it's spent by system and by campus. It's also a board item. So it's an information and an action item at a public meeting of the Board of Trustees. So the representation that these are hidden dollars, that you're not aware of those dollars, that you don't know where they're coming from or where they're going is simply false. We provide that annual report to you every year. I've been here 20 years. You've gotten it every year I've been here. So let's be clear about the factual information here. These auxiliaries were created in order to help us raise funds, to manage grants and contracts, which we can't do on the state side the same way UC can. They were created to help support self-supporting programs like parking and housing. And they were also created in order for us to provide certain functions like faculty and student housing, as I've mentioned. The increase in the number of auxiliaries over time have been for those functions. And we just recently did a report that the board received that I'm happy to provide the committee that outlines their functions, what they're doing, and how they're doing it. But I just want to be clear that these are not hidden dollars. But I'd also argue if 95% of them are designated by the giver for capital outlay programs, for endowed chairs, and so forth, it'd probably be a stretch for you to go in there and reappropriate those even if they were state entities. I mean, that certainly would put a pall on anybody providing us any money. So we've had this discussion before. We continue to object. I think you substantially limit our ability to use these auxiliaries the way you first created them. The Fresno case is one of many cases that have differing opinions and different statements of opinions as it relates to the role of our auxiliaries. So I'm sorry that I couldn't cite others for you today, but I just want to be clear that that's not the only court that's ruled, and it's not the only court that's opined that those auxiliaries do serve a function for the CSU. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions, but again, we're opposed to the bill We've offered amendments in the past that we think balance everybody's needs here, not been successful in that. It would be happy for me someday to do that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Other witnesses in opposition to the bill? Questions from the members of the committee? Mr. Blakesley.
Thank you. Yeah, I have grave concerns about this legislation. We just heard one of the witnesses testify that as soon as this is implemented on the CSU and UC campuses, they will push to do something similar for K through 12, which is also suffering from very deep fiscal difficulties. We need every opportunity to get more monies, and having nonprofits involved, I think, is extremely helpful. I was chair of what's known as a cooperating association, a board president for a number of years before this position, which worked in local state parks, and we raised hundreds of thousands of dollars locally, sometimes from businesses, sometimes from individuals. I'm not clear what would argue that shouldn't apply to cooperating associations for state parks. There are county organizations which are dealing with health and human services that deal with both government money and private money. I don't see why this wouldn't then apply to that, following again with this concern about why CSUs and UC should be treated separately from other nonprofits and ultimately our churches and our synagogues. As a former trustee at a community college, I remember with quite a bit of anguish when a very wealthy donor who held some conservative political views wrote a six-figure check, and when it became known that he had engaged in this very generous gift to the school, there were people who sought to politicize the issue. And he never wrote another check to that school and was, I think, very disappointed by the fact that what for him had been an act of, I thought, compassion to the school had been turned into been politicized. So I am concerned that this bill sets a very, I think, unhelpful precedent for nonprofits, especially in a state that is struggling and needs all the help from a nonprofit help, volunteer help, philanthropic help. And there are many who do believe in the maxim of the New Testament that when they give, the left hand should not know what the right hand is doing. They sincerely believe that anonymity is important because they actually are not seeking fame or credit. And so I just think on a number of fronts, this is not the right precedent to set. So I'll be voting against this bill.
Thank you. Ms. Corbett?
Senator Yee, in reading the analysis, this bill has several exemptions from disclosure. Could you elucidate us on those?
Sure. Let me, in general, in terms of trying to answer your question, just say that this bill really talks about how do we want to function in the state of California. Do we want to operate in secrecy, or do we want to operate in openness? It is very, very clear that there is substantial evidence that talks about how these foundations and auxiliary really serves as an extension of the public institution we're talking about. The representatives from UC, the representative from CSU basically lay that out, that there are functions that are better served via these foundations than the university itself. And as indicated by the CSU representative, she said that the state legislature created these functions for that particular purpose. And so I don't think that the intent of anyone in the legislature ever said that we ought to then put all of these activities, behind
Senator,
some secrecy
could you answer
whatsoever.
the question and then we'll get to the close?
Because
I think we're more into the kind of wrapping it up.
So with that, there is an exemption. And the major exemption is the fact that there's a pay-to-play element that people are concerned about. That to the extent that you do not get anything back from that donation, then you will, in fact, stay anonymous. It is that clear. In the bill, in Section 1, it's made very, very clear that if there's nothing in return, there's no requirement for disclosure whatsoever.
Senator Corbett, does that answer your question?
I was hoping to have something a little more specific.
You're asking about
Can I help?
Senator Yee.
You're asking for the
exemptions from the California Public Records Act. It's in the analysis.
Yeah,
I just thought you would like to there's been some comments made. I thought you would like to emphasize the fact that, for example, information obtained in the process of soliciting potential donors, that would be exempted. The name, address, or telephone number of a person who donates or volunteer services would be exempted from disclosure unless there is the pay-to-play element, as you mentioned, and would also further exempt from disclosure name, address, telephone number of donating board members. So I just was pointing out that there's several exemptions from the California Public Records Act in order to protect people.
Now I can ask you to close, Senator Yee.
Well, I think I kind of said pretty much what I want to say. This is really about, how do we want to operate? I mean, do we want to operate in secrecy? That there are functions of a state entity that are shifted now over to a nonprofit. And we're not saying all nonprofits. We're just talking about the CSU and the UC foundations and nonprofit. By extension, then, these entities should, in fact, operate in daylight, and that's all this bill does.
And I assume you're asking for an aye vote.
I think so.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I know that we're a little bit behind time, but I felt that this is a very important bill, a very important issue, and we needed to devote the necessary time to debate. Given the time constraint, I'm going to just make a couple of very quick observations. Sonoma State University was referenced earlier. It is a university. It's not in my district, but it's immediately adjacent, and I actually have two children going there. And the issues with transparency did disturb me. And I think what Senator Yee is trying to do is walk that delicate line and that delicate balance between protecting privacy and protecting the intent or the purpose of the auxiliary organizations, as well as provide the public the necessary transparency. And I would argue that as an institution, a university, a public university, is different in quality and in type than a park. And there are issues of transparency that would apply to a university that wouldn't necessarily apply to a public park. And for the reasons that have all been discussed here, I do support your bill. And I ask if there is a motion. There's been a motion. Will you call the roll?
The motion is due pass to Senate Rules Committee.
Aye.
Evans?
Aye.
Evans, aye. Harmon?
Aye.
Harmon, aye. Blakesley?
No.
Blakesley, no. Corbett? Aye. Corbett, aye. Leno?
Aye.
Leno, aye.
4-1, the bill is out.
Thank you.
We are going to recess for the members of this committee to go to session and to Democratic caucus, and we will be back as soon as those events have ended.